For neighborhood business and development, we have Councilor Hogan, Councilor Driscoll, President Hudson, Councilor Schultz, and myself, Councilor Allen. And we have Commissioner Collins here, Deputy Owens is here, and I'm assuming that you'll call different department heads up when needed. So what I wanted to do, I know we're discussing 3 separate pieces of legislation. So I wanted to get the smaller but not insignificant one up first. So if we can start with the $186,000 of ARPA funds, that'll be good.
Absolutely, yeah. So Deputy Commissioner Michelle Skapansky is going to cover this item.
Okay.
Sorry, is there an extra packet of stuff?
1 second, sorry.
Here,
Yeah, you might have one at your desk.
oh, they're in the office?
I took mine home.
Oh, you did?
Mine had in the car.
Is, see if they can print you one.
Afternoon, everyone. Michelle Spansky, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood Development for MBD. So the emergency abatement pilot program that we have, what we are looking to do with this program is to replicate a model that's very similar to our blight busting program. If you're unfamiliar with that program, that is where we are correcting exterior code violations on vacant properties that are usually owned by banks. We are looking to take that model and apply it to occupied rental properties in particular cases where there's certain types of defined code violations that are either defined as kind of immediate hazards or as reoccurring hazards, meaning that they're a frequent reoccurrence of a problem that maybe the repair isn't getting done correctly. The idea of what we are looking to do with these funds is to kind of create a situation where oftentimes these are the types of violations that create health and safety hazards within properties that are very problematic, but don't necessarily immediately. They kind of walk the line of whether or not the individual in the property would need to relocate. So what we're hoping that we can do is try to use these funds to pilot a program where we would be just making those repairs, particularly in situations where the landlord does not meet the comply by date, isn't communicating at all with code enforcement. We would look to use these funds to pilot a program where we would hire contractors to go in and correct the issue. We would then be billing the property owner for the cost of the repairs. If that bill goes unpaid, it would be rolled over to the taxes, very similar to how we are using the blight busting program right now currently. Our idea for this program is something that we certainly have seen a need for over the course of the work that we've been doing with the community ambassadors over the last couple of years. A lot of the case management work that we're doing on a weekly basis are many situations where there are violations that are happening again and again over the same properties, or there's situations where they're just getting dragged out for so much longer than they need to, and ultimately they become a situation where it is using a lot of staff resources on the part of code enforcement. It's using a lot of staff resources on the part of the BAA and the legal department. Meanwhile, it's creating a lot of additional stress and health issues for tenants. And we think that this could be an opportunity to kind of mitigate all of that. And also potentially ultimately down the road kind of reduce the need for other types of funding that we would be putting into relocation, so that we can kind of help to continue to preserve our housing stock. We, over the course of the cohort that we participated in with the Cities Rise grant, the city of Rochester actually used some of their Cities Rise award to pilot this program. So they've been great just in kind of sharing all of the information and how they went about establishing the program. So we modeled pretty closely the types of violations that we would be looking to start with based off of the policy that they were using. Just some kind of preliminary data from what they saw over the course of their program. They had allocated $200,000 over a 2-year period. Within 1 year of that, they had completed about 36 projects for about $100,000. What we're asking for as a part of this particular pilot is that over the course of a year, we would allocate $150,000 directly to the repair fund. And the goal would then be to kind of use the data that we get between the time that the program would be in place to reevaluate, see if there's any types of violations that we might want to additionally consider kind of adding in based on things that we're seeing. become very problematic or reoccurring violations. I will say the one note, just from kind of some of the preliminary data analysis we've done of our own data, where this might be relevant, something that I saw pretty consistently is that it seems like a lot of reoccurring issues will come up at around the 15 to 16 month mark. So just kind of as a baseline, we're starting with a window of 18 months for a repeat of the same violation, but we would certainly obviously work very closely with Jake and his team to figure out kind of situations where this would be the most relevant program. From the data that we've seen of everything that we have open of code violations that are currently open beyond their comply by date, we think a conservative estimate is that at least 20% of those violations could be potentially eligible for something like this. So there's definitely a need for it.
So this is this a loan fund? Because I don't see, okay.
No.
So in this case, the city would hire the contractors.
Correct.
You're sending the contractors out to the place, they're gonna fix it, and then the city would then pay that contractor, or the landlord has to pay the contractor?
The city will pay the contractor,
And then the landlord.
we'll turn around and send a bill to the property owner,
Okay,
and then if that bill goes unpaid, then it will roll onto the taxes the following year.
okay. And does this, when the landlord starts to pay back, does it replenish the fund?
That would be the goal, is that we would
Okay.
want to take a look to see how we could kind of create this in a way that's self-sustaining. I will say that when we did this for the blight busting program, obviously that was a slightly different context. With vacant properties that are owned by banks, we were trying to be really strategic about how to make sure that we were best kind of recouping our investments. So between kind of the first phase of that grant and the second phase, we realized that if you were even 1 quarter behind on your taxes, the likelihood that you were then going to continue to pay them when those charges finally hit was extremely low. So we were very strategically in targeting kind of some of those to properties where they were likely to pay. In this particular context, though, we definitely think that the need to keep residents stable and in safe housing kind of outweighs fully potentially recouping all the costs. So I think where we would also be looking to kind of leverage additional funds that we would bring in is through things like as a BAA continues to scale and those types of fines that we're bringing in on an annual basis increase, we'd be looking to see what we could do to kind of roll some of those over into a program like this so that it doesn't need to be kind of a continual allocation every year.
And if there's a situation where the tenants have to be temporarily relocated, say for like 3 to 5 days, like in a hotel or something, the city will include that cost and then pass that on to the landlord. And then the last question, there's a shortage of contractors that are available. So what advantage does the city have to be able to pull these contractors to do these jobs?
Sure.
Where it's not ending up in the same thing where you can't find a contractor to fix it?
Sure, certainly. So we would be looking to kind of replicate the process that Codes already uses for when they're going out to put their pool of qualified contractors for things like demolitions. So by having somebody kind of that is teed up for the year, I think that's we would use those kind of existing mechanisms. I don't know that the city is going to have any, like certainly contractor shortages are what they are, but the reality is that people need these services. So I think that the scope too of the types of things that we're looking at here, it's a little bit different than kind of repair projects. So oftentimes when we're talking about contractor shortages within MBD, it's more along the lines of construction, whereas this is kind of like you need a plumber, you need a plumber. So we think that that is certainly something that we may encounter, but it's also kind of we need to kind of work through those situations.
Okay.
Counselor, if I could add that one of the other very specific things that the business development department side of NBD is doing is looking at where are we growing contractor capacity within the city. So we'll talk about that again a little bit later in the meeting around a request for qualifications. But to Deputy Commissioner's point, the type of work that we're looking at here is much quicker turnover. An electrician or a plumber is usually in and out a lot faster than someone who's framing a house.
Okay.
Michelle, I'm curious. We've talked about this a lot of times in multiple conversations over a long time. How does the bill that remains unpaid get added to the tax roll?
Sure. So there's a distinction. I think this sometimes gets confused between fines and then services that we are performing. We have the existing ability within New York State statutes where we can bill property owners for the cost of services that we perform onto the taxes. Where we get into a more complicated hang-up is when it becomes a fee or penalty that we are adding. Whereas this is, we're simply saying, we did this for you, you owe us for this thing we did.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I
So-
think I knew that, right? Because we do that with like mowing lawns and stuff. If the people are
Correct.
just being delinquent, we just do that,
Yep,
right?
exact same.
Oh, that's
exact
great.
Same model.
So, and what's the total budget we're putting towards this?
So we're asking for a total of $186,000 for a one-year pilot. So the fund, $150,000 of that would be allocated fully to projects, and then there would be a $36,000 offset for to offset existing FTE within NBD to manage kind of the whole RFP procurement process.
So saying a one-year pilot, I see here that Rochester had 200K allocated and used about 99K in their first year. Would you imagine using all of this in the first year, 186, or will this be
So
meted out over 2 years or something?
So I think we're gonna kind of evaluate that as that's a point of kind of keeping it within a one-year pilot period so that we can try it, see what's working, see where there's areas where we need to kind of improve it. We feel like that's a realistic number that we could do within a year. Certainly to the point that at minimum we think 20% of the open violations past their comply by date could potentially be eligible for this right now. I would you know, we'll see kind of exactly what that looks like as we get into it. But I think that it's very, we expect that we'll be able to use them kind of within this period. And then based on what we see, be able to come back with a kind of some better data around what we think a realistic need is kind of for moving forwards.
That's great. So you said you imagine 20%. How many are there total?
There's about 10,000 open violations past their comply by date. So
you imagine
it's
about
just shy of 2,000 violations could potentially be eligible for this right now.
Okay.
Certainly within all of that, we would be looking to prioritize landlords who have the largest kind of patterns of chronic non-compliance, right? So if this is your first time, you're a small town kind of one property owner, first time being past a comply by date, you know, we're certainly, that's part of the, I think, kind of discretion between Jake's supervisors on his team to kind of make sure that we're doing a full property history review before we would send something to this so that we're not dinging people for $10,000 charges potentially that, whereas you have people who have a very clear established patterns of kind of not doing what they need to do. So.
I have a question that is more of a legal question. Maybe Deputy Mayor or Commissioner, you may answer this.
I don't have a law degree, let's be clear about this.
You know, one of our struggle, especially with when you talked about BAA, for example, was this idea that when we charge a homeowner with a certain amount of cost, that they couldn't roll it to the taxes. You know, how would we mitigate this, rolling this to somebody's taxes considering, and isn't there state law that prohibit that in some way?
So this is the distinction between, because this is considered performing a service, there's a distinction in between the state law. We currently have the ability to do this. We already do it with things like cutting the grass. We do it with blight busting for exterior code violations. Performing a service is allowed to roll onto the taxes. We are not, there's significantly stricter parameters around when penalties or fines may be put on taxes. So that's where the distinction is.
But wouldn't there be an apparent in this though? The part of the law that say an apparent of fines in this, because if you bill somebody and they don't pay, isn't that
in this particular
be that
situation?
argument?
In this particular situation, we're sending them a bill as opposed to telling them it's a fee that they have to pay.
Okay.
We're simply taking the bill that we paid, passing it over.
So Michelle, procedurally, how's this work? So you already are aware of 10,000 properties. Do you send a letter to the landlord saying either correct this, or we're gonna send somebody in there to correct it? Is that how it's gonna work?
Correct, yep,
Okay, and then, as far as that goes, then the bill will go to them. If
Correct.
they don't pay that in a certain amount of time, the money goes on their taxes,
correct.
like that. You think you got enough money here? I know, they only spent $9,000 in Rochester, but you think you got enough money here for this?
Well, obviously, if I could just chime in, Councilor, because that was the other thing that I was thinking was, but even with that, I think the capacity issue must be it, because Rochester, that 90,000 only did 36 projects. So if we're looking at 2,000 that are delinquent, obviously capacity is an issue, right? Finding the workers and having the staff to track down. I mean, what?
I think what we're trying to kind of accomplish for this initial pilot period is asking for something that we think is realistic based on something that's been demonstrated. Understanding that Rochester was able to accomplish this during the midst of the pandemic, we want to make sure that we're not asking for more money than we can actually get out the door.
Okay, so that's what I mean. So logistically, operationally, you'll have somebody in your department handle all this, because there's gonna be a lot, you'll have to call the tenants, say you're gonna be home, all that stuff, you know?
That's part of why we're asking for a half portion of an FTE.
And as far as the contractors go, that'd be all prevailing wage, probably?
We would go through all of kind of the standard processes that we go through for putting out a RFQ for qualified contractors. Like I said, very similar to the process that we're already doing when we go to hire out for demolitions.
Okay,
So.
good.
And on that, to add to his question, the 36,000 for the half-time FTE, so is that a new hire?
We would be offsetting an existing staff salary.
Okay, so that they're already doing something really important in neighborhood business development. We don't want to stretch you guys too thin, so is it wise to hire somebody and?
So we think in this particular situation, the person that we would be having do this is already does a lot of these functions as it pertains to blight busting. So we have, it's not like we're creating a system from scratch. It's just, it's an additional kind of pot of kind of category, I guess, of stuff that we would be doing. So it's not like we have to fully build something from the ground up. So that's why we think this is a realistic place to start. And certainly, like I said, we would be very intentional about looking at the data as we go through after the year pilot period, and then kind of making an ask of whatever that ends up looking like based on what we see evidence in the data.
So if after this year, once it goes through and if it's successful, does that go into your budget?
So I think we would kind of figure out exactly what that looks like when my understanding of kind of the mechanism of how things like BAA penalties are collected, those all go into the general fund. But we would certainly kind of take what we're bringing in those types of funds, and also then what we are able to actually correct from or collect from bills being paid outright, and then kind of put something together based on our understanding of what we have. So.
Council President, just if I anticipate the success of this program, we make the argument that it needs to be embedded as a part of our operations. right.
The other point to, we've all touched on, one of the contributing factors, one of the things that we found within the zombie program was that once the banks became aware of the fact that we were serious and we were going to control their cost, many of them started complying that hadn't complied before, so they could control their own cost. So we're very curious at looking at what does the effect of our ability to publicize that this work is happening due to increased compliance, because in the end, as Director Dishaw has talked about, we're in the compliance business. So that to us is one of those other factors that we're going to look at, that it has to do with cost and collection.
So when you talk about chronically non-compliance, is there, what is that? What's the parameter?
Should I name them? I think anybody who's a district councilor knows pretty aware of who they are.
Right.
You know, and this is going to send shockwaves through their community.
Right.
In
So
terms
what's
of a baseline of eligibility, we're using 18 months of the same violation happening
Okay, 18 months.
twice within an 18-month period as a threshold that could deem you eligible for getting it corrected for you.
And is there, beside the time frame, are there specific number of violations that need to happen, or can it?
Yeah,
or might
I
not?
don't know if you got a handout, but there's
Oh, yeah,
they're all
I got it.
outlined there. Those would be kind of where we would be looking to start with.
Okay.
And then certainly I think if there's it would be up to the discretion of Jake in terms of if there's other situations that maybe might not be exactly one of those violations, but they thread that needle of it is something that we could fix within kind of a repair that would be similar in scope to what these would be at, and it would also be a situation where it would enable the residents to be able to stay stably housed by fixing it. We would certainly consider something like that eligible as well.
Okay, just, so assume that something is, and then there are those properties like that here in Syracuse, right? Assume the property is completely inhabitable and that it may qualify for demolition, for that example. Would you go as far as doing that? And
Yep, so we already have mechanisms in which we would be doing that, and I think if it was that type of situation, you would not be necessarily eligible for something like this. We would be looking to relocate you immediately.
and then just leave, what do you do with the property? Do you continue to demolish it and bill the cost to the owner, or do you just leave it alone?
In that particular situation, that's it goes through kind of the court system. So a demolition is a very specific example of we can't just demolish a house without permission from the court to do so. But basically what we're asking for with this is kind of a separate, distinct tool that we don't currently have in our existing toolbox that can be applied to this particular types of situation that where we're seeing a lot of challenges kind of bringing properties into compliance and adding basically so that we can add this to what we have as our available resources. It's another option. So
I just want to say I think this is awesome. Good work, everybody, and
really
I really hope it goes successful, and I hope that, as Hogan said, delinquent landlords are shaking in their boots, and we hit them with some repair bills. And I hope we can scale it up because it's really a great initiative.
And I think we gotta be cognizant, this is not only about like issues like with water or like plugged toilets or things like this. This could be issues like with lighting, electrical work and all that stuff. You know, I mean, that can pretend to be obviously dangerous situations too.
Structural hazards.
And I think, yeah.
That's why you're the deputy mayor and I'm the city council.
And I think for those of us that are working hard to bring solution around housing and stability, you know, you talk about retaliation, fear of retaliation, where people don't have to go as far as much as raising so many issues. You know, code is going to take care of it. You know, which put up all of this fear that our tenants have around, you know, code and issues and living situations. So I think it's a good move. It's a good move to help.
Another question, if I could, how did you identify what violations you considered were priority or?
Sure. So we worked mirrored very closely what Rochester had in place for their particular policy as kind of a starting point. Just based on kind of the scope of the repairs. I think, again, after we kind of get to the completion of the initial pilot period, we would want to be looking at our own data to see what gaps we're seeing, just kind of from some of the preliminary work I did to that end. I think things like interior surfaces could potentially, depending on the exact scope, I think that would be a question of what we would be looking to evaluate during this would be, is that best suited for something like this, or is it better suited for the mechanisms that we have within the lead program or other services of that nature? So.
Because two things I'm thinking, mold and bed bugs, is that something that you think you would ever include?
It very much, we'd have to kind of like look at the data and see what were kind of biggest reoccurrences of things. Obviously there's certain types of infestations like rodents where that's major kind of health and safety. So I think we would just have to, like I said, make those decisions based on kind of the data, but we're thinking that this is a place to start for this initial year.
Great.
All right, so I would like to move on. I'm going to move on to the legislation request to allocate the $11 million of ARPA funds. I'm assuming you're presenting on this as well, Michelle?
Tag team effort.
Okay.
Yeah, so this actually has been a fun meeting for us to look forward to as a department, because we're bringing forward three things that we're super passionate about, and you know, in all of our conversations with all of you, we know you guys are super passionate about as well. So I do want to recognize who else we've got with us to be able to call on and in a pinch for emergency stuff. So Director Dishaw is here. Director Kimon Jordan. We've got, and then when we get to the lead one after this, we've also got Keenan Lewis, Gene Stanton, and Jessica Vinciguerra covered on that side as well. So as far as the $11 million ask, what you have in front of you is the map of the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative. So something that the mayor rolled out as a premier initiative right before the pandemic. And then we, of course, all became concerned around what does the pandemic mean for any initiative. And what we're able to do is talk to you today about the fact that we've actually made significant progress, and the ask that we've got in front of you allows us to go a lot farther in making sure that people within the city of Syracuse have a chance to own or rent a home that is both affordable and respectable, and do that while making sure that for all of the years in which we've been able to do to address blight within the city through demolition of blighted properties that were bringing down property values and becoming centers in locations to support criminal activity, we now can go turn around, and what we've been doing for the last 2 years is invest in rebuilding where these demolitions have occurred. Early in the allocation process for the American Rescue Plan Act funds, we came to you and you all approved allocation of money to the Greater Syracuse Land Bank for $5 million. That allowed them to do $4 million worth of demolition and $1 million worth of property stabilization to prevent properties from backsliding to the point where they need to be demolished. That money, they've been exceptionally efficient in spending that, and certainly with Councilor Hogan being on the board, you're very familiar with that work. So I know all of you have seen it within your districts. So what we're talking about now is really supercharging our ability to build back. To date, what we've done is we've been able to allocate some of the entitlement funds that we have to us annually from HUD for CDBG and home. We've been awarded $1 million from New York State through the Affordable Housing Corporation, and our development partners have also brought money from NYSERDA and New York State and the Attorney General's office as well. So we've been able to build a lot of homes that are now owner occupied. Housing Visions has a request in at the moment to New York State to build 52 units, 32 of which would be within 2 families for a low-income housing tax credit application that we'll hear back from later this year. That's a significant reinvestment. What we're asking for here is an $11 million that would allow us to go farther in building one-family homes for owner-occupied. That would be for first-time affordable. Affordable housing for first-time income-qualified buyers. Additionally, 2-family homes. We want to pilot a program that's been incredibly important to the Deputy Mayor for a long time, where we can not only build the wealth within the family from owning the home, but make sure that they get the good training for those that want to be landlords, where they can supplement their own income and supplement their mortgage payment by being an owner landlord. So we've got that, and then additionally that we would be able to do continued work in rental housing. We're looking at doing this a few different ways. One is new build, the other is substantial rehab. So I'd mentioned that the land bank properties were properties that were, some of them have been stabilized. 2, we're looking to do it in and around the strategic neighborhoods that we've already identified within Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative. These are the neighborhoods where we know investment pays off and investment is deserved, and that's really important. 3, Deputy Mayor and I have been working with a national consultant to build out a request for qualifications so that we can have a pool of qualified developers to be able to do the new build and the substantial rehab. And to my point earlier about looking to being able to expand our developer base, this RFQ will also be asking for contractors that are interested in participating in this work, but not yet at that point where they necessarily want to be the full-time developers, so that we can do some matchmaking and be able to grow capacity that way as well. And so it really positions us so that for the first time, we are in control of what properties and what funding builds what type of housing where we want it. And it's just an unprecedented moment for us to be able to expand this. So within the letter, I have given you the absolute bare minimum of properties that we would develop, because I'm always going to underpromise and overdeliver is my goal for you guys. If we were to only use ARPA funds, we would do 30 units. That's what I can promise to, I'm sorry, say again?
30 new units, not including the rehabs.
30, I would say the bare minimum, like if I hit the lottery and moved away and somebody else came in that didn't care about this stuff, they'd still manage to produce 30 new units. We're going to do a lot more because we are tying it together with this other money. The other money on the rental side that we're currently working our way through right now, there's outside of the regular allocation of American Rescue Plan Act funds that came to us through Treasury. The HUD has allocated to the city $5.1 million in home ARP, which we are going through the full standard process of public engagement on that right now. We've been engaging all the homeless housing service providers, because that money is specific to providing permanent, to addressing those that are at greatest risk of homeless or currently homeless. And so that's also money that'll help on the rental development side as well. So that's the big picture, and I'll stop and take questions.
Okay, so I have a few questions. So just for, I guess, my sake, the original letter had 4% admin fee, correct? All right, so now it's 2%. All right, so the 2%, okay, so the 2%, the $220,000 would just be for that housing project coordinator position, just that one position?
So the reason I went from 4% to 2% is, and in our internal process for vetting this, I was reminded that the staff that is directed to the program is actual program cost, and I was counting them within administrative cost. Okay. So the 2% is a max that we would spend over this period of time on things such as accounting and all that other stuff. I expect it would be less.
Could you explain that distinction a little more, Commissioner Collins? Just the 2%, what would, the 2% that was included in cost, what would that involve?
So the way that ARPA considers administrative work is any work that is not direct in program delivery. So a staffing person whose work is in identifying the property and putting together the financing package, that's a direct program cost.
Gotcha.
The check writing to the contractor is an administrative cost.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. So my other question was about the income qualified. So what are going to be the income limits? Is this going to be at 120% or 80%? Because the 120, technically ARPA can go up to 120%, right? So in this case, which one would it be?
So it will always be limited by the most restrictive funding that is partnered together within the total capital stack, as we call it, the amount of money that's put together. So if it's got home dollars in it, it's going to be capped at 50 or 60%. If it's got CDBG dollars but not home, it could be capped at 80. If we do have a project that is ARPA dollars and other developer dollars, private dollars, then we can go up to 120. Okay,
because the problem, and this is not like a play on home headquarters because Kerry is here, but he knows all the numbers. Because one of the problems with the way the new homes are being built now, a lot of people that would be under the 80%, technically it's kind of a little struggle for them to afford the mortgage still. So that's why I was asking, like, is there a case for it to go up to the 120 to make sure that more people are able to move into the new homes?
There's absolutely a case for it. What we're looking to do with this is make sure that we've got the highest impact and getting the most amount of people into new homes, so that what we're going to be looking at is that type of information. What other money do we need to pair with it so that we can get as much housing built as possible? And frankly, also what's appropriate for that particular neighborhood.
Okay. And then another question I had, are these funds going to be available to individual investors as well, or strictly developers? So like, you know how we have a lot of people that are starting to do rehabs now in the city, small construction companies. Are they going to be able to take part in these funds, or it's only going to be for the players that you already have in the infill construction project? So
this is where I'm really excited about the request for qualifications that we've developed. As Deputy Mayor said many, many times, we've been in a situation where the tail has been wagging the dog around what properties get developed. Right now, what we're able to do with this allocation, feeding into the fact that Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative is 2 years down the line, Land Bank is well-established partner. You've mentioned Home Headquarters, and we have a lot of other developers in the area that are doing good work. What we are going to do with the request for qualifications is say, if you are a developer that wants to be participating in this, get yourself qualified, and then from there we can present to you the menu of options that we've got for opportunities. Developers that want to come forward with some of it, being able to bring with them some of their own development capital, position themselves so that properties are going to have a wider range of end user.
Okay.
Does that get to what you're asking for?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. And my last question,
The RFQ will be rolling.
okay. That's good to know. So my last question, I know you said you're doing 30 units of new housing. So realistically, do you guys have a number that you would be able to attach to each house? Like how much dollar-wise would be attached to each house?
So it depends on the type of development. So what we find is that if we're building a single-family home for a new occupant, it's going to cost about, from design and construction right now, it's about $360,000. For which an owner is coming in, and to your point, a lot of times they're challenged on being able to have a high-end mortgage. They will end up qualifying for a purchase price of about $120,000 to $140,000. That matches the value within the neighborhood, what their capacity is, their ability to grow wealth and not be rent burdened or mortgage burdened. So what does that mean? That means we're leaving $200,000 to $220,000 of subsidy into each property. When you look at it on the rental development side, so a low-income housing tax credit program that is going into a development, if it's a competitive, there's two, I'm not going to get into the weeds with low-income housing tax credits, but there's two programs there. The competitive one puts more money into it, and so a lot of times we're last dollars in on that. And we're going to end up, the unit is more expensive to construct. It ends up being a little over $400,000 a unit, but the city might be looked to for closer to $60,000 to leave into it. So that's why, depending on the type of housing, it's really going to vary a lot about the amount of subsidy that we have into it. The substantial rehab is also, those are unique projects where projects have typically have overruns from the initial budget. So you have to have a larger contingency built within it, because a developer really doesn't know what they're getting into until they pull down the plaster and see what's behind the walls.
Okay.
Commissioner, I'm sorry if I missed it, but so we're talking 30 units. Do we know what percentage you're imagining are single-family, two-family, multi-units?
So, and again, the 30 is the bare minimum that I am.
What do you think the high end might be? I mean,
I'm scared to say a number. My imagination, I see us well over 60. But I'm also
not knowing all
public
the costs,
record,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm
30 is what we're agreeing to right now. But if everything goes right and everything's magical, maybe 60.
Yeah, maybe more. There's
a lot of factors at play.
There's a lot of factors at play, including the fact that our grants team is continuing to look for additional resources to put into the funding.
Director Rudd just spread his magic dust on it, so it'll be it'll be over 60 now that he's done.
There we go.
His
All
magic
right.
housing landlord dance. Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'm always happy when someone else is willing to take the responsibility for that number growing.
There we go. But yeah, sorry. So what do you imagine? I mean, do we have a goal? Are we looking for multi-unit? Are we looking for single family?
So the overall goal for the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative is 50 owner-occupied, 150 rental units.
Okay.
Oh,
So where are we at right now to date? Do you have the numbers to date?
Yeah.
So right now we have 6 or 7 that have been completed for owner-occupied single families, fully completed or very, very near completion. And then the remainder, about 11 or so, are actively under construction. We are in the process of site evaluation, which I kind of, that's a very broad category that includes everything from kind of finalizing all funding streams, to being in the process of kind of doing environmental reviews. Basically, we haven't issued you a commitment letter yet, so, or we could just be still kind of looking at the site and working on some level of land assembly. We have about, sorry, I have this in front of me. Beyond what we actively have in construction right now, there's 52 units of affordable rental properties that are in site evaluation. And then there's an additional, all told, within this sheet, we're, of the various dots that we have on here, looking at roughly 120 units that are in some level of evaluation or kind of committed, so.
That's, so 120 units that are under evaluation for the 150 goal?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
So it sounds like you're about halfway there for owner, well,
This is a mix of everything.
Yeah.
This is a mix of everything. So on the what I handed out, the side that says priority infill development site evaluation citywide, basically anything that's a gray dot is something where it could be single family, it could end up being a 2-family, it could end up being a rehab project. There's a whole bunch of other, there's about 30 sites particularly concentrated within the Elmwood and south side areas. Of additional gray dots that we're looking at that aren't on this map, so.
so, sorry to keep digging into this, but I'm just curious, like, so, it sounds like we have the goal of 150. Do I understand it right that we're kind of near 120?
We're planning, essentially, we're trying to get things lined up for kind of what our priorities are for the next 2 to 3 years of construction.
Okay.
And she's not saying that we have 120 done, like,
Right,
we're not,
it's just like
no.
a various
Yes.
level,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, I understand.
And council is also understanding, and people bring up the pandemic a lot, but the pandemic had a huge effect on our ability to keep this moving, the supply chain and the labor chain.
Yeah.
So we're rebooting again. So Michelle has been doing amazing work to queue up either site or project. So 6 are done. We have another 11 in various stages of construction, and now we're queuing up, entering in a RFQ to make a push. Mike is terrified to say a best scenario number because we don't know if we're going to run into a supply chain problem. We don't know if we're going to run into everybody is looking for the same pool of people to build stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Get it. I guess the thing that I'm trying to dig down and get a sense of is when we say multi-units, are we talking about like 5, 6 units, or is it mostly like 2-family house stuff? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, what's ideal for us. Is it single family? Is it 2-family? Is it 3 or 4? Or are we doing like multi-unit type stuff?
So, so infill specifically is going back where we had 1 and 2 family homes. So we're looking to rebuild 1 and 2 family homes. There are outliers to everything when you're doing projects this size. When you look at the low-income housing tax credit application that Housing Visions has in, they've got 32, so they've got 16 sites where they would be doing 2 families. And then to round out that project, there's a location for a very long vacant commercial building that would be brought online by having single units put into there in a business incubator center. So marrying those types of things together, but specifically what we're always looking for is that to rebuild what we tore down.
Gotcha. So the great bulk of it will be 1-family, 2-family houses.
Correct.
Is what we're looking for. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yep.
And Counselor, also to consider, we don't know what the RFQ could bring as far as a qualified developer with a project that we feel meets the targeted areas we're talking about and is cost efficient for us. So there could be something else that comes down the line for us.
Definitely.
No out-of-state people though, right? We staying here? Okay.
It's, there is a strong preference for local.
Okay, thank
Yes, and the city has control, with this process, the city has control in deciding where this goes and where it doesn't.
So just who decide where to build? Is it the city or?
So specifically, it's the city, yes, and specifically, it's the team underneath Michelle and underneath Kimon Jordan that have been doing all of the site selection based on all the data that we've got from where we put the money in to do demolitions, where we heard most, from the neighbors, all the data that goes into that. So,
I keep bouncing up, but this is what is most exciting about this opportunity for us. You know, I've been talking to Mike, and the tail is not wagging the dog for this. We know what areas we want to prioritize. We know what areas we want to open up and look for additional site availability on the north side, for example. And we get to determine that. If a developer wants to come along and join in on our plan, they're welcome if they're qualified.
And I'm asking about that because there are, when you drive around our city, there are streets that you will see that probably from one house to another, there are probably 3 or 4 houses missing between. Does that play into where the choice to build goes?
Certainly. So on the other side of the citywide map, there's a kind of breakdown that we have here of some of the data factors that we looked into when identifying the clusters of sites. So the really big things would be kind of breakdowns of land use and occupancy, proximity to community assets, proximity to previous investment, and then overall kind of site viability. So to your point, kind of trying to find areas that are right on that kind of middle tipping point between they have enough buildable vacant land where we could really make a visual and just kind of look and feel impact, really kind of turn a tide of a block. I think though, within kind of the broader goal of the Resurgent Neighborhoods Initiative, the areas where infill, new construction is going to be the most viable kind of tool is not that's not a one-size-fits-all solution for kind of all the neighborhoods that we're trying to talk about. I think the North Side's a great example of that, where there's infill isn't the best, is often a significantly more complicated tool to use kind of in bulk. But that doesn't mean that there isn't different needs. It's just that we need to think about what the kind of most appropriate strategy is for those neighborhoods. So that's where I think kind of trying to leverage strategic rehabilitations. Similar other things, kind of you'll see areas within the kind of Resurgent Neighborhoods map that shows kind of all the areas citywide. There's sections that we have where there's no infill planned at all, because the need in those neighborhoods is on one end of the spectrum, either for whatever types of different things that we would be looking to still strategically target those resources. If that answers your question.
So,
Infill on Midland?
There is infill on Midland.
yeah, those would be the 2 families that are gonna go there, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's some
And
pink.
there are situations that
dots.
come up, I'm sorry, I keep jumping up, but I'm really excited about this. There are other situations that come up. We had a fire recently on the north side, and there's about a series of 4 houses. I can't remember, I think it's Mary Street. And there's a series of 4 houses. We got a call from an individual that just bought a property, doing great, taking care of it. The next one is dilapidated. The next one caught fire, and we're trying to figure out how we can move that owner along because we don't anticipate them fixing it. And the next one is a land bank property. How can we plan to redevelop that holistically, partnering with existing owners, the land bank, and what potentially we can do?
And adding in, the Deputy Mayor, and I know Councilor Allen makes this point, is adding some of the amenities that people didn't have in, back in the 19th century, I mean, where you have a driveway and maybe a little backyard and everything, make city living much more attractive.
Yep. And that is.
I was down on Delaware and Grace the other day, and I know Rich is here, but that building's coming down there, and that's going to close. We're getting there, but that clustering of the neighborhoods and houses, nothing gladdens my heart more than seeing that, because that's been a long time coming. And one other question, I'll ask the Deputy Mayor this. I would support more money for this from our.
Correct.
I would totally support more money to do this thing, because nothing changes the nature of our neighborhoods and brings this city back. I particularly want to compliment this administration for your focus on housing, especially if these
Oh, yeah.
2 folks here, I mean, this is
Absolutely.
really important.
Yep.
And I would be much, if this was $20 million, I'd be in favor of it.
Absolutely. Mike was allocated a little bit more. He's holding back a smile over there, but we borrowed some to do some of the other great stuff we're doing, the abatement program and the neighborhood ambassador program, all centered around housing and supporting housing. But when the $123 million came up, I unapologetically started having, tantrums, housing. So between the infill, the lead project, and the other things that we're working on, we're really honed in on neighborhood revitalization.
So when would we know when this would be enough and not enough? When, I guess to piggyback on what Councilor Hogan said, we have a window
Yep.
for this money, right? And we gotta get the best out
Yeah.
of this money.
So we're gonna be really zoning in on identifying the projects. We have existing great partners that we're not gonna send them through the hoops of a whole full-on RFQ, and start pre-qualifying some people so they can get going. We wanna, you gotta take advantage of construction and warm weather seasons in Syracuse, at least to get foundations going and get some of that stuff. So that is what Michelle has been like dedicating her life to, is mapping out where these projects are gonna be able to go and getting moving. That's really why we're doing the RFQ, because we need more people to help us build in this volume. We've never done this before in the city of Syracuse.
Now with that, Deputy Mayor, and I guess that's for you, Commissioner, is there a capacity within the staff to really move this along? Do we need to approve more position to help the process? Because if the contractors are backing up, I can also imagine maybe at the city side, staffing-wise, maybe
So
get these moving.
To the point that's being made, capacity overall to this, like Counselor, I'd gladly take $20 million. I would also then turn around and say, I have concern around us being able to move all of it within the time frame that the Treasury allows us. That said, I will not be shy about asking to come back if we're able to.
Commissioner, the only reason I mentioned, one of the reasons I mentioned that is because you and your housing partners have been particularly effective in pushing this money out and getting things done. I worry about some of the other stuff we have plans for, not having enough folks to get that into the pipeline, but you've been successful. So with the land bank and the home headquarters and all that, nothing gladdens this old Irish flinty heart more than seeing houses in neighborhoods, new houses and long neglected neighborhoods in the city. So like I said, it's only because you've been good at it. You're like the New York Yankees.
Definitely appreciate the shout out to the Yankees and
Rare American League shout out.
I was actually surprised that it wasn't a National League team.
Counselor, the biggest hindrance for us is the window. Because just construction, the variables that go into the time you need.
And let's face it, folks, I mean, we wouldn't be talking about this if it wasn't for President Biden's American Rescue Plan that's helping the city, and we sweated it out for 2 years under the pandemic, not getting any help from the federal government. Now we're getting not only help from the federal government, but money that's going to really revitalize our neighborhoods, so.
Yeah, and I will add, and Counselor, I haven't addressed your question, so I will. It's a combination of the fact that we've had that money, but also when you look at the fact that this administration produced the first ever unqualified audit, right? We are positioned so we can handle the money in ways that we've never been positioned before, which is, great credit to that team.
Counselor, not to forget, not to forget.
Let's not forget.
When we talk about revitalizing neighborhoods, everything that's going on the economic development side, the loan products, the commercial corridor, all of it has to happen again. People can live in great housing in neighborhoods, but if they don't have a viable store or a viable commercial product next to them, they complement.
So I'm recognizing one that Counselor Majuk arms are even longer than everybody else's here, but I haven't answered your question yet, and we've got 5 minutes to talk about another $5 million. So to your question, we are adding a position because of the fact that the teams already exist that we've talked about on both the planning side and on the financing side. They're going into existing core strengths. That's why we believe we're able to do it with one position.
Okay, before we slip into that 5 minutes, I gotta go back to work, so. Question for you. Can you talk to me a little bit about
additional respite housing and how that's gonna.
Actually, Deputy Mayor is going to pop up and talk about that.
So I wanted a little flexibility because there have been some ideas that have come to me for housing that doesn't fit right into the single family or the rental. Case in point, our gun violence situation, individuals that end up going into the hospital because they were shot. There's a great program and a collaboration, VPOP, can never think of the acronym, what it stands for, but we bring counselors, psychologists in to talk to individuals who are recovering from gunshot wounds. It is a vulnerable time in their life, and it may be the moment in time where we can get them to think about some other path. What the outreach teams have told us is that starts to happen, and then they're discharged. And they go right back to the neighborhood they were shot in or the very house they were shot in. What I'm hoping is that at least one of these structures can be developed to be a respite space where people can go, have a transition plan. We obviously have to get the partners together to provide the service so that people can have a minute to de-escalate before their transition, which may mean sometimes leaving our community. But what's ever best for them. So I wanted some flexibility in the language for that.
Still moving parts then.
Absolutely. With $11 million, there's the option for me to at least try that with one facility. I just got to make sure I have the appropriate partners who know how to run that type of facility.
Appropriate location.
And the appropriate location. Which counselors I may have to put outside of the city.
I mean, and that's fine, because we've been talking about respite for what, 20 years?
Yes.
And talking about getting folks to where they can recover, okay.
So I may have to place it outside of
That's
the city.
why I asked about
So
that.
Counselor Schultz has a question. She's asking, can you technically use the ARPA money outside of the city?
It has to be in a distress census tract. I will verify exactly where. If the $123 million that was assigned to the city means a city designated distress census tract or a
County.
they are designated all over the place.
Right.
So I will check with Jen. Jen too. If not, oh, there you are.
Because that's very needed. It's been talked about for quite a while. Actually, it's been talked about to the degree of.
Good afternoon, Councilors. Jen Tift, Director of Strategic Initiatives. So actually, the way that we are categorizing this particular program as a part of our ARPA plan, we are classifying this as part of our revenue replacement funding. And the city has a much broader latitude for how and where we can spend the money. We actually don't have any restrictions on the where, so it doesn't have to be in a qualified census tract in the city, outside of the city. This is the most flexible bucket, and the bucket is a little restricted, so we can't put everything in it. But because of these very questions, we wanted to put this program in that bucket so that we had the utmost discretion and flexibility. So we're not geographically limited in the way we are with some of our other programs.
And Deputy Mayor, if that's the case though, would we be able to maybe have two different locations and two different?
We could
areas?
possibly do so, and I see an opportunity that this could be something that some other funding source will be very interested in.
It would have to be, because you can't have two people shooting at each other and then.
No, and the other
Same
thing,
house.
I'm gonna be having conversations with our folks at Vera House. They are the only entity that I understand know how to run one of these. You just don't know where a Vera House facility is.
Right.
And that's the key for something like this. But the legislation is written that way to give us a little flexibility.
Okay. Is it a quick question?
It's a quick question. In terms of the contractors, and I know within the inner city, we struggle with contractors. How's that looking for us, especially those that are applying to build?
yeah,
Are there people here in the city that are actually getting approved to do this kind of work?
So the RFQ has not been issued yet. We're finalizing it right now. Yes, we have contractors. Yes, we have a challenge with having enough. And our business development side of NBD is actively working to grow.
And understanding local for MWBE certification, that certification is for businesses within Onondaga County. The fact of the matter is that we would have to at least make people eligible that are operating within the county.
All right, so I was anticipating at least somebody from Housing Visions and Jubilee to be here, along with Carrie from Home Headquarters, and I mentioned those two first, so y'all don't think that I'm being biased. But I did want to see, Carrie, if you had any input, 30, 60 seconds input real quick. Since you are the only one in the room that's actually putting these houses out there in the soil.
Flattery will get you everywhere, Counselor, so thank you for that. No, you know, I'm going to just say something that's very obvious, but I just feel like I do have to say it. I think LaToya hit on it before. We're constructing new homes. We don't want to devalue those neighborhoods. So we're trying to thread a needle right now. Largely, we've been getting subsidies through the home program, which requires that those buyers be under 80% of the area median. So you have to have somebody that qualifies for, say, $140,000 or $150,000 mortgage to buy the home, yet also be under 80% of median. These ARPA funds are fantastic, totally agree with the plan, but to the greatest extent possible, I think that should be for these owner-occupied homes. In a case of low-income housing tax credits that Housing Visions might use, and the commissioner has heard this speech before, but it would probably, in my opinion, not be the best use of these very flexible dollars to subsidize a low-income housing tax credit where you're already pegged to assisting people under 60% of the area median. So again, I think everybody in the room knows that. I just felt compelled to say it. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to, this is the request for legislation for $4.5 million to address childhood lead poisoning.
So, as we move on, I want to say, I did not specifically invite any developers to this meeting. We're really focused on programming.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Spansky. Thank you, Michelle, for all you do.
I'm also recognizing that we're over time, so I'm going to be relying to begin with on the fact that you guys have a lot of institutional knowledge about this, so I'm going to be quick, and then you're going to slow me down where you ask more questions.
I think we're all right. I mean,
Yeah, we're fine.
Oh, okay, good.
I mean, you know, I don't think you have to get it done in 3 minutes. You know, I don't think that's realistic.
That is, I don't want to cover more than $1 million a minute.
My one
so
question for Deputy Mayor is, could we take $300 of this $11 million and fix that clock? Because I'm just feeling very hood every time I look up at it. I'm like, we can't fix this clock.
I do believe the clerk had some additional dollars put in her
You
budget.
got some dollars, clerk. Just take 250, fix that clock. Can we do that?
Counselor and Commissioner, I have to
dragging
leave for a meeting.
All right, now let's be serious here and talk about $4.5 million for lead.
So again, so our third and final item to talk about in the committee meeting today, another one where we know the passion is equal among us around childhood lead poisoning, and Counselor, this community is significantly better off due to all the work that you did to lead us to having an ordinance where we can cite in ways that we were never able to hold property owners accountable. So this money does two things. So it's $4.5 million that allows us to have strengthen our enforcement as we build that out. We've talked with some of you on the side on the fact that we're actively moving towards that. We have the people in place. So Gene Stanton and Keenan Lewis head up our enforcement team, and we're getting all of the inspectors trained up on being able to do that. This money on the enforcement side will allow us to purchase what are known as XRF guns, and what these do is they are able to point and shoot and determine immediately if there is the presence of lead within paint. Currently, the way that we are set up, we are setting ourselves up to do it as per the ordinance, because we didn't see this money in front of us at the time, was a more affordable but more drawn out period process, and that was to do a lead dust swipe sample that is then sent out to a lab for analysis, and then we have to wait for that to come back.
And with this gun is immediate.
With this gun, it's immediate, right? So what we would be, and as you can guess, these are not inexpensive equipment. So we're looking at purchasing 6. Purchasing the training, they need to be serviced after a couple years, so it's got the money in there for the servicing. They need to be tested. They need to be locked in a secure cabinet. So it's everything around that technology, and being able to make sure that the staff is all able to use it. We're tying that together with the fact that we have funding from the Community Foundation that allows us to do additional training. We've got money in the budget that you all have allocated around the training, so that our staff is top-notch all the way around in their knowledge, their expertise, and their certifications. When you look at what happens when we detect it, well, Jessica Vinciguerra has done an excellent job of managing our grant through HUD. That is the lead hazard grant, and that allows us to be able to spend money in homes where the resident is income qualified, to be able to address the costs to remediate where the problems are. We partner with the county who qualifies the contractors for us, and so our money is into qualifying the tenant and then paying the contractor and then partnering with the county on the other side of it. We've done it that way for a few years, and it's worked well. Capacity. Really, real challenge there. So we're moving the money along, but this is an area where we're looking to grow more contractors as well, because there's simply not enough. We think adding more money to the system will actually incentivize more contractors, because they're going to see that there's more work. And so what this money does is it allows us to have the flexibility to have multiple sources of funding, because we've got some money through the Community Foundation. We allocate some money through our Community Development Block Grant. And now we'd be looking at doing an additional 144 houses solely just with this money. Again, that's what we see as a minimum number. I will say, when we in 2018, 2019, when we were writing the grant for what ended up being awarded to us through HUD for the lead remediation program, it was costing about $13,800 per unit to remediate. We are now estimating $20,000 per unit to do exactly the same work. A mere 3.5 years later.
That's just COVID supply chain issues and the cost of labor increasing?
Exactly, Counselor. Exactly.
How
So
are you guys choosing the 144? Like, how do you decide which ones?
So there's two ways that typically the way that things have come to us now is someone is been notified by their doctor, notified by the health department that their child that is 5 or younger has an elevated level of lead within their blood. And so they are then reaching out to us, or they are a concerned parent and aware of our resources. Jess does a really good job of getting the message out. Health department does a good job of getting the message out, so that they will come to health department and ask the health department to test, and then the health department will determine this way. Now, with this new ordinance and with the training that we've been doing and with the XRF guns, we'll be identifying the properties before the child is poisoned.
Okay.
And
Is that in the school as well?
Counselor, it's always within the home.
Okay,
Always within the home.
but the notification, county health, doctors?
So the notification, when a child has an elevated blood lead level, that is a notification from the county or from the doctor.
Okay.
Yep.
Not the school.
Yeah, if you think of division of labor between county and city, the county's responsible for the on the health side. We're responsible on the dwelling side of things. This will, with the combination of the ordinance, the testing, and the equipment, honestly begin for the first time ever to get us in front of the problem and stop having our children be our lead detectors, which is tragic beyond all means.
So I had a situation with this family that I was helping through work, but I think the 2-year-old tested for lead. So we needed to get into the apartment to, it was like the stairs that had the problem. So naturally it was the stairs, so we needed them out of the house so we could repaint the stairs, but they didn't want to leave because they didn't have anywhere else to go. So we would have to pay for them to stay in a hotel, but they didn't want to stay in a hotel because the kids catch the bus to school, whatever. So they decided to stay in the house, but half of the family agreed that they were going to stay downstairs. They weren't going to go upstairs for that day. The grandmother was upstairs, and she said she was going to stay there, but of course she didn't. So the guys went in, they redid the steps, painted everything. She walks down the stairs. So the guys have to come back in, redo everything. She walks down the stairs. They were there 3 times, like redoing it. So in this, like, will there be like some funds? So if we have to relocate the family, even if it's for a weekend, like, will we be able to do that to avoid a contractor coming out 3 times to do the work.
It's, grandmothers are not always known as abiding by rules,
Yeah,
right?
they don't
They've reached
listen.
that, they've reached that point. Because of the fact that this falls within the revenue replacement, as Jen Tiff spoke to, we have more flexibility in how to be able to use these funds than we do with the award from HUD.
Okay.
Also, though, the support from Community Foundation allows us some flexibility as well. So when we have these outlier cases where there's, because to your point, most of the work we're able to do with a person
Yeah, in
not
the
having to relocate. But if we do have a rare instance, that's something we could look at.
Okay.
So I see here the XRF. This going to be new, or do we already have these tools in place?
No, we have to get certified. We have to get certified when we purchase them. Keenan, you want to speak to the guns?
Good. Briefly. Keenan Lewis, Lead Program Coordinator with the City of Syracuse. Yeah, with the XRF devices, we have to purchase them brand new. So again, to Michael's point, they have to come with warranties. You have to get leak-proof tests. These are devices that carry radiation, so there's health concerns and proper safety and protocol. We have to go and learn and get certified in regards to how to use them. So we're currently in the process right now. Again, expensive devices just because of the technology and the capabilities that they have.
All right. Also, I see that there's up to 5% administrative cost here.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it different from the 2% that we saw earlier?
So frankly, the 2% on the housing, 2% of 11 million ends up being about the same as 5% of 4.5 million. And when you look at the fact that a lot of the work is still programmatic work, we're able to keep it under that 10% cap that we've been applying to our subrecipients, because it's the fact that we've got a lot of that ability to put it in-house. That said, some of Gene's time, some of Keenan's time, as well as on the cutting of the checks, the Treasury would consider some of that work to be administrative. So we're trying to make sure that we're staying within the rules, and Jen is never in a position where she's happy to answer questions to the Treasury Department or an auditor where she doesn't have the strict documentation showing that we're in compliance.
And these things are very expensive, so we got to make sure y'all like handling with care, right? Are they big? Are they like handheld?
Absolutely. Handheld devices, and that's what we're currently going through the protocol of how to use them, how to transport, because we have to properly transport as well. So we have to make sure we're properly transporting and make sure they're secure. Just make sure that inspectors are adequate and trained enough to be able to carry them around, because they're pretty serious devices.
Yeah.
So are they instant?
Instant.
Very
Yeah, between the 3 to 5 seconds, you can put on a surface anywhere from metal to wood to any substrate, and it'll give you a reading within 3 to 5 seconds if there is positive lead in that substrate.
And every single inspector is going to be trained on this?
Every single inspector. So currently we have over 20 plus inspectors that are certified as lead inspectors. So they are certified to go in and do the lead testing, to do a full lead inspection of a home. So it's 20 plus inspectors. I may be off by a few, but we're all certified. And now we go to the range of getting federally certified. So for 6 months, we are able to go in and to perform these testings. But now in this window, we also have to get federally licensed, so that way we can carry this license for 3 years to be able to do these inspections within homes.
Can you, do you know, Commissioner, roughly what the breakdown of the 4.5 million will be? Like what percent is going to XRF, what percent will be going to Jessica to supplement the money that's already there? Thank you.
Yeah, and speaking larger buckets with it, let me make sure I'm pulling out the right spreadsheet here. Here we go. So, we're looking at about $350,000 worth of salary, over the time period, because we're looking at the fact that we would be expending this. So for ARPA, we have to have the money fully committed by the end of 2024. We then have until the end of 2026 to be able to actually get it all out the door. So we're recognizing the staffing cost, through that period of time. So we're looking at about $350,000 from now until then. We're looking at about $800,000 related to training, contracting, acquiring the contractors, that type of stuff. $250,000 in getting the word out. $200,000 in equipment, including the guns.
200,000?
About 200,000 in equipment overall. And then that gives us about $2.9 million for direct work inside the home.
So that would go to Jessica too.
Yeah, Jessica has the ability to spend a lot of money. So it's an impressive trait.
Jessica.
What are you doing with it all, Jessica? No, she does great work.
To Councilor Hogan's point, my team can move money.
Yep.
You know, I just wanted to, I want to commend fellow Councilor Driscoll. I was here when we first started talking about this years ago, and I can't believe how far we've come in not only recognizing the problem, but addressing it. You know, Mr. Dishaw and everybody else, and Keenan and everybody else, and certainly the mayor's administration. But I just wanted to ask the councilor here, we are collaborating with the school district as far as assessing this issue.
To an extent, there's issues with HIPAA that prevent us from knowing exactly communicating back and forth with the school, because if a child tests positive, it's been addressed at the state. So basically we can flag, we can say there was a test and there is issue for concern, but we can't say, for example, there's a big difference between a child testing at 3 micrograms per deciliter versus testing 15 or 20. You know, there's a lot of different behavior.
As far as determining the location where the child lives, that's in the ether, or?
Once they test positive, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, that's worked. The county handles most of that work. So like once they test positive, the county kind of steps in, but there is coordination with the school district.
Because I mean, it's important, because a lot of times these haven't been experienced in the school district. A lot of times these kids move around quite a bit.
Yes.
Especially in the city.
Yeah.
So good, okay, great.
Okay. No further questions or comments? Well, thank you guys. This was a long one, but this was very important.
It's great. They're all great projects.
Thank you.
My
Really appreciate
my
y'all taking
applause
the
to everyone in MBD. Great work, everyone.
Yes, everybody.